that's for me, living life so merrily. It's so easy, can't you see? Polka, polka, that's for me. Polka, polka, everyone come along, it's lots of fun.
Welcome back to the Tap and Shoot podcast. I am Miguel Adorati, and we're bringing you here our latest podcast. We've got Carlos Diaz, who's going to help me go over the Metamoris 6 grappling event. The BetDSI Sportsbook is actually one of the only sport books out there that takes active bets on grappling events. They do the Jiu-Jitsu World Championships. They've done the Abu Dhabi's World Championships, and they've been faithfully putting up lines on Metamoris. Metamoris, an all-grappling event going down in California, really putting together some amazing shows with big names in the grappling world, and in a beautiful format. The event is run really well. And they get great fights. However, one negative part of theirs is actually the format of the rules. But I brought along Carlos Diaz, my grappling guru here, back to the podcast. He's going to help us get through some of the details and get into some of the specifics of some of these fights. Carlos, how you doing?
How you doing, Miguel? How you doing to the fans? Glad to be back.
Great. And Carlos, just to go over, Carlos is one of the instructors with the American Top Team. He works out of the facilities in Florida with the fight teams, assisting some of the fighters there in their corners and in their training. And he's also the lead instructor at ATT Indianapolis. He's helped us out on podcasts before with grappling, and I really know no better person to go to for some of the latest news on who's hot in the grappling world. So we'll see how we get into this show here. So basically what they've done here for Metamoris is they've got out in California, they're going to go ahead and put together the 6 fights in the super fight format. Let's talk about the first one, which is like old school versus new school here. We got Xande Rivero, Alexander Ribeiro versus Keenan Cornelius. And Carlisle, I'll let you take it away first.
Correct. This match here, Xande Ribeiro, who is actually, for nowadays in the game, considered old school, only at 34 years of age, versus Keenan Cornelius, who is probably currently one of the most decorated athletes right now at 22 years of age. So there's a huge gap in age difference there. Xande should probably be in the Masters division, and Keenan, who's a current, a multiple-time world champion, and current in the tournament circuit.
So yeah, now I remember, it's interesting that Cornelius is 22. I mean, for sure, Xande was competing when he was 22. He showed up at the Abu Dhabi's with his older brother, Saulo Ribeiro, and actually impacted those events for many, many years, winning his divisions, competing in the absolutes at an extremely high level, and really at a couple of times, losing to Roger Gracie and some of the guys that he was in wars with. He's an old time competitor. How has he been lately? Has he been active, Carlisle?
You know what? I know he's done a couple of events. But obviously not as active as Keenan Cornelius. Xande, he did a couple of the Metamoris events in the past, so he's a returning customer. And he might have done I'm honestly not sure at the top of my head if he did the World Masters here not long ago, but I remember seeing a couple of things on the podiums for him.
I understand. Now, when we get into Metamoris, though, what you're looking at here with Metamoris is, this is where I think the rules come into play, because the rules are, it's a 20-minute match with no points marked, so position points and dominance overall are not really counting towards a victory, because if you reach the 20-minute time limit and there's no submission, the match is declared a draw. Now, this has resulted in the history of Metamoris, and they've had 5 events. Roughly 50% of the matches have ended in draws. And this one's got draw written all over it because Ribeiro, if I recall, in his style, he's very much a controlling fighter, just like his brother Saulo. He likes top position, he will smother you, and he will work for holding position. He's going to be very hard to submit in this format, I think, even if he is older and not as sharp as he used to be, because he's a strong competitor, and strength is actually, the last thing you kind of lose. You lose your reflexes and speed maybe first, But Zonde is probably stronger now than when he was at his peak competition level. So I'm not sure I see a submission coming out of this one. What do you think? Is Keenan tricky enough?
You know what? Keenan is very tricky. That's actually one of his probably most dangerous weapons. He's very innovative. However, if I'm not mistaken, this match is going to be a no-gi match. That's where Keenan is very creative. He's very creative with the gi. He has developed, quote-unquote, a new guard style. They call it the worm guard, and a couple of different odd positions and traps with the gi. But that doesn't matter here. You know, now we're going to see a similar match as we saw with Keenan Cornelius versus Vinny Magallanes, where you have two very high-level competitors. Sunday, I believe, is going to come in a little bit bigger size-wise, but I think the determining factor in this match is going to be conditioning.
Okay, we'll see how that one goes. The book right now has the draw as the favorite outcome, actually, because right now what they're showing is Zonde Ribeiro will pay back plus 233. That means you get $230 or so for a $100 bet. If Cornelius wins, you get $185 back for a $100 bet. And the draw is at minus 520, which means to win $100, you actually have to bet $500. So obviously the books are thinking this one's going the distance.
I would agree with the books. I would give a small edge to Keenan's footlocks, actually. Keenan is very tricky with those footlocks as well. You saw the match with Vinny Magallanes, and Vinny's one of the guys that prided himself in not tapping to footlocks. And he had him in a few really bad spots in their 20-minute match before. But again, you know, I'm going to go with that this is going to probably most likely be a draw.
And let's go on to the next match, which features Clark Gracie taking on Roberto Satoshi. Similar story here at the lines. Clark is going to pay you $200 for a $100 bet. Satoshi is going to pay you $165 for a $100 bet, indicating, maybe that Gracie's slightly favored. And the draw is going to cost you $350 to make $100. So again, the books are leaning towards a draw on this one. I think that these lines have been adjusted by the books here for this Metamoris 6 because they, like I said, they're going to show the draw is favored in every fight here. But let's go ahead and go to Gracie and Satoshi. Carlos, give me the scoop.
So here we have Clark Gracie, who's, one of the more active Gracie family members in the competition circuit now. He, in the last 5 years, he has placed in a couple of organizations. The last time I saw him compete live was at the 5 grappling tournament down here in Miami. And he did not fare very well versus some of the guys, the new up-and-coming guys from Fight Sports team, who actually their leader, Cyborg, is the main event. On his first match, he got submitted in maybe 30 seconds.
Wow.
And via armbar, and then on his second match, I believe was the open division that he did, and he faced a guy pretty close to his weight, and got very, he lost by a large margin of points. Now the thing with Roberto Satoshi is that he's a very aggressive, very always attacking, looking for the submission type of guy. So, he has an undefeated record in MMA, all by submission. So I think, I think it'll be interesting to see if Clark can keep up with Satoshi's pace, and if he can, play his game, which is the gi game, and land his trademark omoplata submissions versus Satoshi.
Okay, terrific. Now here's where Metamoris shows a little bit of their flex and strength in the current market, and it's in their ability to draw and use talent that's got contracts with the UFC. And the next fight features lightweight competitor Joe Luazon, who I know Carlisle and I are both very familiar with, facing Dylan Dennis. Dennis here is favored at minus 110 with Loaz on at plus 366. So Danis is being thought of to really possible to end this fight with a submission. And the draw is at minus 269. So you are going to shell out with the draw being the most likely outcome. But what do you think of this one? I see Loaz on as, he deserves a lot of credit for coming over to this format. Maybe he can stay out of trouble. When he was young, he had a reputation as having very good jiu-jitsu for MMA and pulling off a lot of submissions. I think he's always tricky in an MMA fight, and he's always been dangerous, especially in the opening round, to end the fight fast. But I don't know how habitually training for MMA affects your game and the precision that goes down with, eliminating all the striking and fighting a specialist who does just that, and that's what he's getting in Dillon Danis.
Right. I mean, here's my take on it. I'm going to give the advantage to Dillon, and here's the reason why. Dillon is 21 years old. I just saw him compete at a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament, and I believe he submitted every opponent. Joe Lozon is 30 years old, and again, MMA opens certain things, and the grappling for MMA is very different than just regular submission wrestling or grappling. You're not counting on the guy exposing themselves from strikes. You can't set up submissions with the strikes. Now, not to take any credit away from Joe Lozon, but again, he's 30 years old. Dillon brings a very heated pace. He's a current and very active competitor that focuses 100% on jiu-jitsu. So it will be very interesting to see, Joe Lozon is also used to taking a break every 5 minutes on a mixed martial arts fight. This is a 20-minute match non-stop. Can Joe keep up with the pressure for 20 minutes non-stop that Dillon's going to bring to the pace? So, it'll be interesting. I'm actually going to give a very slight margin to Dillon. I think Lozon is crafty enough not to get submitted early, but I think late on the round, it's going to become interesting.
There you go. Now we're getting into some of the big names. The next fight is Chael Sonnen, a veteran of Metamoris, and obviously everybody knows him from the UFC and stuff. And Renato Sobral, Babalu. They fought in MMA almost 10 years ago.
Correct.
And there's not much you can get from that other than that, maybe Chael's submission grappling probably has not improved at that time. And I say that with respect. I like Chael a lot, but Chael's a wrestler base in MMA. He's able to use, his wrestling to maybe work on top position. From top position, he had amazing posture and really good ability to lay out some ground and pound. He sometimes got caught in submissions and stuff because it wasn't something he practiced. But if he got his game off, he was very tough. Now, there's a lot of limitations to his game that he brings to Metamoris, and it basically turns out to be a survival game because I don't think he's going to submit anybody in this format. He's at plus 466 to finish the fight, where Sobral is paying minus 110. Basically, for $100, if Sonnen wins, you win $466, and if Sobral wins for $110, you win $100. So what you're risking is a ton more payback on Sonnen, obviously, that you get. Meaning he's not, the favorite in the fight. The draw is at minus 266. Sobral too. Many years in MMA. He's Brazilian, so he's got to have jiu-jitsu in his background, stuff like that. But when he came up, he was a straight Luta Livre fighter. He added jiu-jitsu afterwards. I don't see. He has more submissions, obviously, than Sonnen, but I don't see him as being, ready to just jump into the submission game and be at the top of his game. This one, I think, has draw written all over it.
Well, here's what's interesting about that. Sonnen and Babalu, like you said, they faced each other 10 years ago in MMA. Well, guess what? Babalu submitted Sonnen with a triangle.
You're absolutely right.
So, I've met Babalu several times at straight-up grappling events. I actually competed against him many years ago during the Arnold Classics in Columbus, Ohio. And everybody discredits Babalu's wrestling, but Babalu wrestled internationally for Brazil.
I said luta libre. I'm taking away. Yeah, I'm taking away his jiu-jitsu, but he was a straight wrestler. I met him in the 90s when he made his debut with the IVC, the old International Vale Tudo Championships in Brazil. And he was making his debut fight there. He won the fight. And he was actually friendly with Coleman. They'd met before. Coleman had been down there a few times. And they were associating with each other like anti-jiu-jitsu, like pro wrestlers, kind of hanging out together. It was really funny to see. But I don't remember what his T-shirt said, but it was something along the lines of, wrestling all day or something like that. So he does have very good wrestling. I think wrestling could be a stalemate between these two because they know each other, they felt each other before. Is his submission game enough to catch Sonnen when Sonnen only has submissions to worry about? I don't know. Sonnen does do some bonehead moves in his fights that get him caught too. Watch the Anderson Silva fight, for example.
Correct. And another example too, and I'm not putting Babalu in the same level as Andre Galvao, but Sonnen just had a feature match, I believe was Metamoris or 2 ago, versus Andre Galvao, who's probably, perhaps top submission wrestler in the world now, and he got caught with the rear naked choke. But that is where Sonnen's weakness is the submission game.
Mm-hmm.
His positioning, his strength, his conditioning, his wrestling, unquestionable. But, can Babalu catch Sonnen with his triangle, or can he catch him with a foot lock? Most likely. I think actually, believe it or not, 20 minutes is, they're both a little bit older. I believe Babalu might be 39, 38 years old, Sonnen being 37. So conditioning is going to be a question here. I don't question Sonnen's conditioning. I do question Babalu's conditioning. I'm going to go a little slight advantage with Babalu, catching him in a submission, probably actually mid-round, within the between 5 and 10 minute mark. I think Sonnen could also get bored. He's the kind of guy that he keeps the strategy really well until he starts getting bored on a match, and then he just wants to do something, anything. And, for a jiu-jitsu guy, a guy with a little bit of savviness like Babalu, that might be his opening to catch Sonnen on a full lock.
Yeah, what I see, and, I like Chael. I love Chael's competitive nature, and I always have. He's competed for me a lot in the past. But he's going into a fight here. I don't think he can win. I don't think he's going to submit Babalu. So now it's either survive and tie or lose. And so it's an interesting mindset. At some point, maybe if you're caught, you give up and you don't fight through it just as hard or whatever. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I like Chael in this format. But in the super fight, we've got another guy from the UFC with the UFC in his background, and that's Josh Barnett against Roberto Abreu. And Barnett knows a lot more of what he's doing in this format than Sonnen does. Talk about this fight, Carlisle.
And this is what's incredibly interesting. Josh Barnett is, who's unquestionably amazing at catch wrestling. A lot of people don't give him the credit that he deserves on submissions, but I want the public not to be mistaken. Josh Barnett is a second-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He doesn't even want to wear his Jiu-Jitsu because he doesn't do Jiu-Jitsu with the gi. But he did Judo for a very long time. He's wrestled for most of his life, and he's an avid fan of catch wrestling, which will catch people offset. I mean, he just submitted somebody that has not been submitted in an incredible amount of time in Dean Lister.
That's right. Now, I remember
expected Josh to have that power, strength, and technique.
Yeah.
However, in the other token, we have perhaps the best heavyweight submission wrestler alive right now. Cyborg Abreu is coming on from a couple of injuries. And, maybe Cyborg is looking at this as a warm-up for the ADCC tournament coming up in the fall. But, he better not underestimate Barnett. Cyborg has been submitted with footlocks in the past. Barnett is incredibly good at footlocks. I like this match because it's a very, nobody knows what could happen. However, I'm going to go, and this is a pretty bold statement, I'm going to go with Barnett by leg submission late on the match.
Wow, that's interesting. I got to give Barnett all the credit in the world for this format. He's managed to stay relevant in a format where you see guys from the past, fade into the past, and that the new rising guys, the new blood, really takes over very fast in jiu-jitsu and in grappling. You get wave after wave of the hot grapplers and stuff, and for Barnett to stay relevant and not really being that active, it is notable. He first popped up. I remember him. To me, Barnett's always going to be a Matt Hume student. I know he's obviously beyond Matt Hume at this point, but he popped up at the Abu Dhabi tournaments. Among the first couple of them, he lost to Kerr in his first appearance after winning his opening fight. But he's been around for an extremely long time, and Hume is a technician of the first class, and he taught him well. And from there, Barnett's added a lot of stuff and always stayed relevant. He's smart. He does research, and he's into this what they call catch wrestling and stuff. And there are no catch wrestling academies and stuff like that. So basically, what he's doing is also like historically researching techniques used in wrestling and things. He's looking for knowledge in places that other people aren't looking, really, and that's what makes him an impressive guy. In Abreu, I don't know that much about Abreu, but I can see the type of intensity that he brings, and he's going to be dangerous for Barnett in the very beginning. But I think you're right. I think Barnett could patiently wait him out and then surprise him at the end because of his technique and because you can't catch a guy like Abreu, I don't think, just because you're much stronger than him or just because you're much more technical than him. At some point, you got to really start putting these things together. And I think Barnett has that, the capability with the technique, the strength at the end of a match, having been there before. He got rid of Lister with a submission very late in their fight.
Correct. And you know what? Credit to Cyborg Abreu. Cyborg is a big man. He's incredibly strong. Very flexible for a big guy. He actually has small guy jiu-jitsu for a heavyweight, and he knows how to use his power and flexibility very well. It's just, I think that perhaps sometimes a lot of people undermine or underestimate Josh Barnett and think he's just a heavy leg lock guy when he brings a lot more to the table, and I think he gets away a lot with that, people underestimating him, and, catches people a lot by surprise.
And he also recently made the announcement that he's looking at maybe returning to the UFC at the end of 2015. And, when your name pops up at a Metamoris event, you're going to be in the public eye. It's always good to have another W next to your name. So I think you get, Barnett motivated at this point. He's a guy that nobody's ever been able to force him to compete unless he feels he's ready and he wants to do it and he feels, the deal is good and stuff. So if he's coming out to compete, I think you usually get, A+ Josh Barnett, and it should make for an interesting match here.
Absolutely, I agree. And,
now,
the other thing is, I don't think conditioning is going to be a factor in either one of these two guys, not only because they're both actually fairly close in age. I think Barnett is like maybe 36, 37. Abreu's in his mid-30s as well. But they're both, even though Barnett may not look like it, but they're both very well-conditioned athletes.
Yeah, the book's got the draw is the most likely outcome at -722, with Abreu paying plus 176 on your $100, and Josh playing plus 298, so you could triple your money if Barnett does win with the submission and you have him at the books. Now, another thing that Metamoris does, that's the 5 fights that have been announced. Another thing that Metamoris does with great success, and I want to direct you, to maybe check the sportbook out during the day of the fights, is they usually do a secret fight, and they've had things like the announcer leaves the booth and fights in a match against another opponent and stuff. And they've had good success with this, and they've attracted some nice names. For this match, they get an all-time great in my book as far as the grappling world is concerned. That's Jeff Monson, former teammate of Josh Barnett. They actually made their debut together at the Abu Dhabi Championships as part of Matt Hume's team. Jeff is in his 40s now, but still, you're not going to find anyone in better physical condition, muscularity than Jeff. And he's been grappling literally his whole life. So what you have here is you have him sitting there, and he's waiting to take on whoever Metamoris puts in front of him. I understand Metamoris had some kind of secret tournament. Carlisle, why don't you tell us what's going on here, since you're on top of that?
Correct. Metamoris had an event where they had some of the best up-and-coming heavyweights in the grappling world participate at a kind of a secret event that they held up. Excuse me. So the winner of that event, obviously, to face, somebody in the upcoming Metamoris event, in this case would be Jeff Monson. I don't know the results of that event. I know a couple of the guys that assisted and attended, but I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be anybody easy, especially nowadays. Now, here's the issue that I have. And, Jeff Monson is a teammate of mine. I've trained with him several times. But Jeff is, he's up there in age at 44 years old.
Okay.
I just saw him fight mixed martial arts here locally at an event. And, he was always very smart playing the rules. But that's the issue here. There's really, the only rule is really submit your opponent other than, maintaining standard grappling rules. But there's no scoring system. There's no points. There's no advantages. Now, here's the other part to that. If Jeff Monson gets on top of you, you're in for a long night. His north-south choke, it's known, many academies call it the Monson choke. If he takes your back, Monson will cross-face and rear naked choke you 3 ways from Sunday. But, my question is Monson conditioning at 44 ready for a 20-minute grappling match with a new, young, up-and-coming grappler?
Right. Monson was always a guy in the Abu Dhabis that, he won many championships there. But yeah, the thing about him is he did have to manage his energy, and it's also notable that he avoided the Absolute tournament, which was an invitation-only tournament in the Abu Dhabis that occurred afterwards, even though he probably would have been one of the favorites to win several of them. And he avoided it only because after giving his all in the other tournaments, he felt like he had nothing left going in for another one right away. So yeah, you kind of worry about his ebb and wane of his energy and how he can manage that in what is going to be a long match here.
Correct, and to understand, I want to say it was 2009 in Barcelona, Spain, at the Abu Dhabi Combat Club tournament. Cyborg Abreu beat Monson on the weight class, and I believe Monson did participate on the Open. And if I'm not mistaken, he lost to Gunnar Nelson, another current UFC athlete. And Gunnar Nelson being, a 170-pounder athlete.
Sure. No, Monson was susceptible to faster guys usually, and you're right. When I said he avoided the Abu Dhabi's Absolute tournaments, I'm talking about during the classic years in Abu Dhabi and even in Brazil and stuff, where he famously threw his pants into the audience and stormed off after he lost the decision. He's traditionally, like I said, he's worried about managing his own energy. And you mentioned it now at 44, can he sustain a 20-minute fight? So it'll be interesting to see if we're seeing Jeff, finally just, age catch up to him, because he was a machine in his day.
Absolutely. However, given that it is a heavyweight match, it'll be interesting to see who the heavyweight is. Yeah,
you said young up-and-comers. So I'm guessing if he's going to face a younger guy, he may be in for somebody who's going to test his energy. So that really makes for an interesting fight. And Munson, with a loss, Munson sort of passes the torch on maybe to a new heavyweight, and that's what Metamoris is all about.
Absolutely, and that is absolutely could be the case. But nonetheless, I think experience. Jeff is incredibly powerful. He's been there before, so he's going to be calm, collected. It's nothing new for him. Whereas a newer guy could be, a little bit of a starstruck and, oh my God, this is a big show. And, those nerves can get to you. And Jeff is one of those guys that he knows very well how to capitalize on that.
Excellent. Well, Carlisle, we got about a half hour in. I want to thank you for your time. I want to call everybody's attention. Go out to Metamoris.com for instructions on how to watch. They offer the pay-per-view on live streaming. It's very reasonably priced. It's a nice, classy event. It's coming up this Saturday. And really, I think this Metamoris 6 is probably their best event in terms of matchmaking and in terms of the names and name recognition of the super fights that they've put together.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And, I'm looking forward to the event on Saturday.
Excellent. Carlisle, let's check in afterwards and see how everybody did.
Sounds good.
Thanks, man. I'll talk to you soon.